Alrighty then. A little over a month ago, on the University of Toronto campus, there was a free speech discussion about Bill C-16, which is an amendment to the Canadian Human Rights Act. The discussion, I call it a discussion because it really wasn't a debate, was between Jordan Peterson, Brenda Crossman, and Mary Bryson. Jordan Peterson was arguing against it. Brenda Crossman and Mary Bryson were both arguing for it. Alright then, just to get started, I'd like to read what openparliament.ca has to say about this bill. It reads, "This enactment amends the Canadian Human Rights Act to add gender identity and gender expression to the list of prohibited grounds of discrimination." It goes on to say, "The enactment also amends the criminal code to extend the protection against hate propaganda set out in the Act to any section of the public that is distinguished by gender identity or expression, and to clearly set out the evidence that an offense was motivated by bias, prejudice, or hate based on gender identity or expression constitutes an aggravating circumstance that a court must take into consideration when it imposes a sentence." Okay then, make of that what you will. I'm actually not intending to discuss C-16, the bill, in detail in this video. In the future, I might do a more intense, close look at Bill C-16, but for now, I just want to point out a couple of truly disturbing aspects of this discussion from the University of Toronto, coming from Brenda Crossman and Mary Bryson, those two professors arguing for it. And to begin, let's look at Brenda Crossman's opening.
I'd like to start by saying that I'm delighted to be here today, except that I'm not. And I'd like to start by saying how much I support and respect all those faculty, staff, and students who are boycotting today's event.
Except that I don't.
I think that that is also a very important form of speech.
I thought she was going for some more snark, but no, she was just wanting to tell us how protesting free speech is an important form of free speech. I'll come back to this, but let's look next at Mary Bryson's opening.
As a Trinity College and OISE alumnus, I'm typically delighted to return to the University of Toronto. Today is different. To make sense of what it means to be here today, I've found myself going back frequently to the 1989 debate at Western on the subject of race and IQ between Philip Rushton and David Suzuki. The stakes then and now are very familiar. To borrow David Suzuki's opening words on that day, quote, "I do not want to be here. I do not want to dignify this man and his ideas in public debate," end quote.
Yeah. Oh, jeez. Oh, I'm sorry about that. Anyway, so notice... Give me just a second. Notice how both of these two professors open by essentially claiming that their opinion is so much better than Dr. Peterson's that they shouldn't even have to be here to defend it. They shouldn't even have to argue with anyone. It should be taken as fact at face value. And it's an insult and beneath them to even have to come in. And I'll include a link to the video in the description. Have a look at it. It's, if you can bear it, it's essentially just another, I think it's nearly an hour of these two just droning on with snark and accusations of wrongthink. Anyway, if that's not bad enough, this next clip is the absolute worst. I can't describe how completely awful what Brenda Crossman actually said in this discussion, and it wasn't brought up by Dr. Peterson later because she buried it in I mean, just the longest drone on that you'll ever endure if you go ahead and click that link below. Anyway, I don't necessarily recommend it, but, to each his own. Yeah, so here's what I'm talking about.
Okay, so is it constitutional? Now, are these requirements around pronouns constitutional? Does the requirement to not misgender the pronouns violate freedom of expression under Section 2B of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms? Probably it does. The Supreme Court of Canada says any restriction on speech is a prima facie violation of Section 2B. But the thing is, that's not the end of the story. The charter rights are not absolute. No charter rights are absolute. There's this whole other section in the charter called Section 1, which says that all rights and freedoms are subject to reasonable limits as are demonstrably justifiable in a free and democratic society.
Yeah, you heard her correctly. She just said it violates the Constitution in that it violates your right to free speech as outlined in the Constitution. But don't you worry, because the Canadian Constitution has a fix-all loophole system which allows you to get around anything in the Constitution, so long as the lawmakers cannot foresee an immediate and direct destruction of democracy as a result of the new law. That's right, don't worry, the Constitution is just a guideline. No biggie. Anyway, that's going to wrap it up for me. I'm going to leave a link to the original video in the description. Check it out at your own risk. I definitely suggest that you check out Dr. Jordan Peterson at the University of Toronto. I will leave a link to his YouTube channel in the description below. You should definitely check him out. Watch some of his videos, see what you think. It's very thought-provoking. Maybe give him a sub. Anyway, cheers.